Hey y'all, so let's go back to Esther. We're going to pick up in Esther chapter 2, and let's read it again in 17. And the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the maidens, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great feast for all his princes and his servants, Esther's feast. And he gave a holiday, or a lessening of taxes, to the provinces, and gave gifts in keeping with the generosity of the king. And when the maidens were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Now Esther had not yet revealed her nationality or her people, for she obeyed Mordecai's command to her to fear God and execute his commands, just as when she was being brought up by him. All right, so Mordecai's a Jew, Esther's a Jew, and they're living in Persia, right? Xerxes, Persia. They're in a foreign land. So we meet Haman, who is an Agagite, an enemy of the Jews. And he hates Mordecai. This is such an interesting story. I feel like I'm not doing it justice by skipping over pieces, but we're looking at the spirit that God gives us versus the spirit of fear. So Mordecai uncovers a plan. It is an assassination for the king, and of course it is spoiled. The king puts it in his chronicles that Mordecai saved the king, and Haman is promoted. Mordecai refuses to bow down to Haman because the Jews worshipped and paid homage only to God, Jehovah. And so Haman now sets out to kill all the Jews and figure out how to get rid of not just Mordecai, but because of Mordecai, the whole Jewish people. Presents a plan to the king. Listen to this plan. So go in Esther 3 and let's go down to verse 8. Esther 3:8. Then Haman said to the king, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from every other people, neither do they keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that it may be brought into the king's treasury." This man offered to pay $10,000. Well, dollars is not right. It'd be much more than that. But 10,000 talents to the king's treasury if the king would allow him to annihilate this group of people. To put into law that they be killed, he would pay 10,000 talents to the king's treasury. And was bold enough to actually tell that plan to the king. Like, he was convinced this was a good idea. And he could convince the king that it was a good idea. Which, moving down to verse 10, king thought it was fine. And the king took his signet ring from his hand, with which to seal his letters by the king's authority, and gave it to Haman, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said to Haman, "The silver is given to you, the people also. Do with them as it seems good to you." So he said, "Don't worry about paying me, and you can kill the people." I can just, that's how Satan works, though. He sets a plan in motion. He manipulates and moves people that are not in covenant with God, that don't hear or know the voice of God. And so as far as King Xerxes was concerned, they're not obeying my orders. They don't follow the king's laws. They have their own laws. They're a burden on society. Let's just kill them. Satan has been setting the Jews up like that. I mean, all the way back here in the biblical times. Persecution of the Jews, hatred of the Jews, wanting to wipe them off the face of the earth is not a new problem. However, as Balaam learned, you cannot curse what God has blessed. The Jews are God's people, and he always, always, always has a plan to deliver them from the hand of the enemy. And we're going to get into that tomorrow. I'll see you then. Bye, y'all.